Can you please tell me what are the new features that were introduced in Java 8?
Yeah. So in new features, there is Lambda expressions, functional interfaces, static and default interfaces, and there are some improvements in the datetime APIs as well. And then there is collections improvement in the Java 8 and streams, parallel stream and sequential stream processing. And then comes for each iterator and then method references. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, what was, how it was useful with that introduction of the lambdas and in static methods, which you were telling, default methods in these interfaces.
Okay. So, with the introduction of functional interface in Java 8, so they have is designed in such a way they have kept the contract we will have only one method in the interface and we'll call it as functional interface, because using that we can provide easier implementation through the lambda functions, lambda expressions. Because earlier when we go for anonymous class in implementations and anonymous method implementations, so this was a verbose kind of thing. So that thing is totally removed here. To simplify that, they have given functional interface and the concept of lambda expressions. And static and default. Static is for backward compatibility with earlier versions, and default means we can have default method in the interface, so that earlier implementations of that interface do not have to implement that method.
Okay. We are not forced to,
Right.
implement those newly added. Okay, good. And I think you have used this new thing in Java 8, right? Which is called, where iterate over the sections. Have you used streams in Java 8?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Before that, can you please tell me the difference between composition and inheritance? When you go for composition and when you would choose inheritance?
Okay. So composition is basically tighter form of coupling, and inheritance we have that flexibility that composition does not provide. So composition, you can say we have parent-child relationship and there is a tight form of coupling. Or if I take some other example, we have heart and we have a human body. Heart cannot live without body. So that is composition. And inheritance means there is a parent-child kind of relationship which we can extend or generalize. So then inheritance is better.
Okay, good. Have you implemented multi-threading in your projects anytime?
Yeah, so here in my project Claims Assure, there was one scenario wherein we were importing all the input records into the database at the import part. So after that import part, we have applied multiple threads for those processing using the executor. So those jobs were submitted to the executor, and the individual task is then run by a separate thread. And finally they have done their work, so result of that is collected and processed.
Okay, good. You have used any Java 8 things which was introduced in multi-threading, or you have not used yet?
So as such, not used related to that, but like we have here parallel stream for that kind of processing, because in our project, what was the challenge? The challenge was that code was running since last 20 years, and we had to develop that functionality for new vendor, and new vendor was Conduent. So for this vendor, we have to integrate their input file processing with the existing system, and they had a different format for input, and our system was processing some different formats. So there was need to satisfy those requirement processing. So on to this refactoring side, we did not give much focus.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thank you. And let me ask you one more thing about this. I hope you have used these abstract classes and interfaces.
Yeah.
So can you tell me, like, in what scenario you would go for abstract classes and or interface? How do you decide that I have to go for an abstract or interface?
Yeah, so if we talk prior to Java 8, so abstract classes were mainly for abstract methods, while in interfaces we were having only the abstract methods, but in abstract class we can have non-abstract methods as well prior to Java 8. But with the introduction of Java 8, those things we were having in abstract classes, they can be, and we can have those in interfaces as well. So that difference is blurred with the introduction of Java 8 interface.
Okay. Let me go with the last question with core Java. So you said you have used streams. So can you tell me, like, how it has helped? How it was beneficial with the introduction of streams in Java 8. How you feel it?
Yeah. So like we can say, we are going for some processing, and onto that processing, we are processing some collection, and while processing that collection, we want to perform some kind of filtering onto that, find out those employees which are having this name, which are having this age. So we only want to process those kind of records. So that for those things we do not need to do separate processing, which we were earlier doing using for loop and then doing that if check, else check. So those operations can be chained together, and we can in a very simple and concise way return the final output. So the writing of that is very much cleaner.
Okay, you mean the code size has been reduced. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And in that streams we have operations like intermediate operations.
Yes.
Okay, so you're aware of that. What are the
So filtering, mapping, and collecting So these are some of the operations.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you. Let us go with Spring Boot now. Okay. I hope you have used Spring Boot a lot. So, what are the features do you, you felt like, that is mostly, used in Spring Boot? Like,
Yeah, so the mostly used features are auto dependency resolution, and then comes starter IO, spring.start.io, from where we can means any newcomer, he can directly go there and just check out those dependencies like the web or web MVC or any other dependency you want to take, and just create a skeleton project. So that is the cool feature there. And apart from this, means a lot of auto configurations and defaults are configured for us. So that is that very much improves the developer productivity.
Auto configuration, in what? Have you have you done any added any specific features using auto configuration?
No, we do not need to do that auto configuration thing. The framework is doing that thing for us. So that is the benefit of using those dependencies.
Yeah, for example, can you tell me a few things which is getting auto configured? Like one is DB, right?
Yes.
What are the
others? And you can say like embedded Tomcat, Jetty. So these things are auto configured. Spring, you can say core of the Spring, that is auto configured. Spring core, you can say.
Okay. What about dependency injection? Can you tell me how it works?
So dependency injection means we are not bothered about creating or instantiating the beans. Instead, we do declare those dependencies which are needed by which beans, and then the container takes the task of instantiation and providing those dependencies when needed. So that task is taken from the developer by the container. So container is doing that stuff.
Okay, so the life cycle of the beans are actually handled by the container itself, creation and destruction. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, and I hope you are aware of constructor injection and setter injection. Can you tell me what is the difference and when we use that?
Yeah, so in constructor, whenever we have mandatory dependencies to inject, then go for constructor-based injection, and for setter, which are optional dependencies and that can be provided at a later point of time, then go for setter-based.
Okay, what happens if the constructor injection fails? The application.
No. That will also means fail to start, you can say. That will fail at the application startup itself.
And what will override? Which one is first, constructor or setter? Like if we have used both constructor injection and setter.
Yeah, so setter one. Yeah, so setter one will override that.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks for that. Looks fine here. Okay. In your project, have you used these multiple forms, like parent form and dependencies form, like that, or have you?
If I talk about about this thing, apart from this, the current one. So we have used this parent and child bound concept, but in this we were having a single bound.
Okay. Okay, fine. And have you used any Spring Cloud features in Spring Boot? Or?
Spring Cloud, yeah. Yeah, so gateway thing we have used here.
Okay.
Yeah. Eureka server we have used.
Oh, you have used Eureka.
Yeah.
Okay. And you are aware of the how it is configured, like how we give the
Yeah.
properties file we mentioned, related.
Yeah, mostly those properties files are given through application.yml file, and then we can have module specific configurations and profile specific configurations as well.
Okay, how it picks up, it has because we have a lot of profiles, like dev, test, and prod.
Yeah, so in the property file itself, we give that which profile we need to make active.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. Okay. And you are aware of microservices, so can you tell me how the microservices communicates with each other?
So first thing is they need to register itself with the Eureka server, and then using Fan clients they can interact with each other.
What kind of communications they use? Like, I mean, you have used how you have used through REST API, or you have used any middlewares like messaging systems?
Yeah, both actually. Yeah, so ActiveMQ we have used here, which were used for storing intermediary messages, and from there we was having say Lambda that was doing that processing onto those messages, and then it was putting into some DB like S3 store.
Okay, so we have two ways of communication, right? So synchronous through REST and asynchronous through the messaging systems like Kafka.
Right.
So when we talk about microservices, there are different services, like 50, 100, sometimes a lot of services talk to each other. So if there is any issue in any one of the microservices, so how do you identify, because of particular microservice is causing the issue? How do you trace?
Yeah, so yes, for tracing we have Jipkin distributed tracing, and to each microservices we have to log that particular thing or some identifier related to that microservices. First thing is logging, and then tracing that thing. So by using, you can do either centralized logging thing, and then through ELK you can find out that this thing is being getting in error, or you can also do, if you go through the AWS way, like you can use CloudWatch logs and log ascent onto individual container level. Then from the CloudWatch logs you can create alarms which will be triggered based on certain metrics when they fail. So those alarms will help us identify that this particular thing has occurred, this particular microservices is not working well.
So we have
which introduced in Spring Boot, and the controller was from the initial Spring version. So REST controller is basically for REST APIs. That was that is you can say a way to implement those RESTful web services.
Okay, and how do you make sure that the return types, it is a matching, when we give a request, we expect the response to be a particular format, like it should be XML, it should be plain text.
So there are two things. One is accept. Accept is for the client, like application XML, application JSON. So we have to set those headers, and for getting the request, we have to set the header content type. So content type and accept, these two headers need to be set properly.
Have you extracted any data out of that headers?
Yeah, basically the authentication information and token information.
Okay, good. Thank you. Have you used any design patterns as such?
Yeah, so design pattern, if I talk about microservices, then solid, gateway, design pattern, and if I talk about only Java, then DAO design pattern, MVC, singleton, factory, builder, abstract factory, wrapper, these have been used.
Okay. And with UI side, you have used Angular or React? Which one?
No, actually Angular and React I have not used. I am looking to work into it. I have used Struts, Spring, HTML, JSP, and jQuery.
So, do you have a basics of Angular? You understand how the Angular normally works?
No, I am totally newcomer to this thing.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. Okay, SQL, you have used joins?
Yes.
Okay, so and what about Apache Kafka? Have you worked on that?
No, I have not worked on Apache Kafka. I have worked on Apache ActiveMQ. ActiveMQ, and there is SQS in AWS and SNS. So these three I have worked on. But I know the basic concept of Kafka, like there are shards, and then there are reader and writer threads that work on to each particular shard, and that shard means reduces the downtime and increases the uptime of the distributed system.
Used anytime like NoSQL, like Mongo or
MongoDB, yeah. So in one of my earlier project in CSC, we were working on one product that was Sparkle, and in that we have worked on one.
what do you think, we normally, because already SQL was there, so what was the need to
Yeah, so basically the need was like schema-less. So in MongoDB, there is no fixed schema, and the need was felt like schema were changing as the complexity of the business was getting increased. So there was felt a need to change that schema as well, and that was being done more frequently than earlier we were doing. So to accommodate that schema, the need was there to have such a schema as DB, and MongoDB supports that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what about Dockers? Have you used Dockers, or you are aware of any Docker commands?
Yeah, Docker we have used, and Docker with AWS, that is ECS, that I have used.
Why is that? I mean, why normally we go for Dockers? What is it's used?
Yeah, Docker is basically container orchestration, you can say platform service or anything you can say. Basically, we have images here, and that image is immutable instance. So by using the containerization, we can quickly boot up our application. We can deploy that image to several containers instantly, and using that containerization thing, our application can auto scale very well. So that is why we are using containers and images.
Okay, thanks. And you have been part of DevOps in your projects anytime?
Yeah, in my project we used Jenkins. So like the build of what we committed, so build, deploy, test, so all these things we were doing there.
Have you written any build pipelines in Jenkins?
Yeah, so I have not specifically written, but that is very simple. Like we have a node, and inside that node we can specify like compile, test, or other stages. So that is very simple, and very simple syntax is there for that.
Okay. Have you worked on Kubernetes by any chance?
No, this thing I need to work on. I'm looking to work on it.
Yes, that's fine. So you said cloud stuff, you have worked on AWS. So
Yeah.
alright, how do you normally connect with AWS? Like you have your environment, the development environment.
Yeah.
How do you talk to that service?
So generally we have like on-premise environment and then the public cloud environment. So first we need to connect to our on-premise environment that is situated in the private subnet, and from that private subnet we can directly go to AWS. So so that thing depends like how we have configured our subnet, whether this is public subnet, private subnet, and then between our on-premises and the AWS, is there any direct connect options? So using that we can go there.
Now, if you have to write an application and to talk to the AWS service, how do you do that?
Yeah, so there is one thing, IAM authentication. So you need to provide that IAM role to your application which want to connect to the AWS. Like I want to connect from my machine to AWS S3 bucket. So in S3 I must have that role that provides access to my function, my class for reading. So that role must be means assigned to that particular calling system, and after that role is being assigned, then other thing is very easy.
And you have here those SDKs, Java SDKs for AWS.
Yeah, so AWS itself provides an online SDK. So using that we can work very quickly.